Good evening. On TV47 News tonight, Busia boos minors. At least 80 minors arrested in Busia County while making merry in total disregard of COVID-19 containment protocols. The juvenile delinquents had locked themselves in a home whose owner is stuck in Uganda due to travel restrictions under the COVID-19 pandemic. Police say more than 100 others escaped. Still tonight, slain siblings' funeral. The bodies of the 4 minors who are suspected to have been killed by their mother laid to rest in Nyandarua. The siblings whose bodies were found laying in the same bed as their mother's house in Naivasha were buried in one grave. Their mysterious and heinous murder still a twisted riddle. Plus, from bad to worse, university students who were airlifted from Sudan where they complained of deplorable living conditions are now COVID-19 positive. Government says the 15 students who tested positive in Mombasa must have contracted the virus upon arriving into the country. The details here tonight. And new hustler strategies. Deputy President William Ruto has devised a new strategy to reach out to his supporters under the COVID-19 pandemic restrictions. The self-proclaimed hustler is now meeting and distributing economic empowerment tools to the youth at his current residence. Magnanimity or political wits? We have the details tonight.
This is TV47 News Tonight with Abdullahi.
Anne Wairimu is our sign language interpreter. TV47 News Tonight with me, Abubakar Abdullahi, begins right now. Good evening and welcome to the broadcast. Our top story. Now, over 80 minors were arrested in Busia for engaging in underage drinking without adhering to COVID-19 regulations. According to Matayos Sub-County Deputy Commissioner, the school-going children are aged between 10 and 20 years. Andrin Kilemi begins our broadcast tonight.
Parents of over 80 school-going children that were nabbed in Burumba Estate, Busia County, while merrymaking and drinking liquor without adhering to COVID-19 regulations, arrive at the Busia police station, where the children spent the night on Wednesday. According to Matayos Sub-County Deputy Commissioner Joseph Onyango, the minors are aged between 10 to 20 years.
Those between 10 years and 17 years were 77. Those between 18 to 20 were 5. They go to various different schools in Busia, and their classes range between class 6 and form 3. So these children, female were 19 and male 63.
The minors were partying in a house whose owner is stuck in Uganda due to COVID-19 travel restrictions. Area residents complained of exceptionally loud music, hence calling the police, who arrested the minors.
They are also not going to leave the parents to get away with it so easily. They must explain to our satisfaction the level of responsibility when it comes to taking care of their children.
The over 80 school-going children will be taken to mandatory quarantine for 14 days under strict police supervision. Andrin Kilemi for TV47.
Elsewhere, the bodies of 4 children allegedly killed by their 42-year-old mother were laid to rest in Nyandarua County today, with family and friends yet to come to terms with the killings of the 4. David Mudhoka reports.
Emotions ran high at Murungaru village in Nyandarua County as the remains of 4 siblings killed by their mother were buried on Thursday. The somber send-off signifying that the 4 are no more. The hundreds of residents who turned up for the burial yet to come to terms with the cold-blooded murders of the 4 children that happened at their home in Kabati Estate in Naivasha, Nakuru County. Hundreds more had turned up at Naivasha Hospital mortuary on Thursday morning to bid farewell to the young angels robbed their lives too early. The procession to Nyandarua would leave soon after the 4 coffins were mounted on a hearse. The radiant smiles on the portraits of the 4 children, a reminder of the bubbly and charming souls taken from the face of the earth, literally by the hands of their mother. Family and friends have eulogized the 4, 3 girls and 1 boy.
Unaposikia ndoa imekusukuma mpaka mwisho, kabla hata ikufikishe pale mwisho, tafadhali kuja kwa ofisi. Na nawasihi sana.
Soon after prayers, these surviving 2 siblings led the rest to the gravesite, their hopes of cherishing siblinghood with their 4 younger siblings already 6 feet under. One by one, the coffins descended into the grave, lying close to each other, perhaps a reminder of how close the 4, aged between 2 and 7 years, were. Their mother, Beatrice Mwende, who is the prime suspect in the killings, was arrested on Saturday and arraigned at a Naivasha court on Monday, pending a hearing on 6th July. David Muthoka, TV47.
May their souls rest in eternal peace. Elsewhere, the National Treasury has launched its strategic plan. While launching the plan, Treasury CAS said that the ministry is working on a short-term economic recovery plan before coming up with a long-term plan. Muhammad Ali tells us more.
The National Treasury and Planning Chief Administrative Secretary Nelson Gaishuhie said the ministry is implementing a budget to fund COVID-19 response committee for a short term, as they plan to have a post-COVID-19 strategic plan as the long-term solution.
We have now a budget that we're implementing. In that budget, we've put funds for that short term, and as you heard in our speech towards the end, we're saying we also now planning to have a post-COVID-19 strategic plan. But of course, we are working hand in hand with the national committee that is taking care of COVID.
The ministry is hoping for a gradual reopening of the economy with an enhancement of revenue collection measures. Treasury is, however, hopeful that the Kenya Revenue Authority will meet its revenue collection target amidst a slow economic growth.
KRA at times has been underperforming. So what we have done, we have enhanced our revenue collection measures by, of course, improving on our IT. We have scanners at every point, and also we're increasing our revenue base by bringing in more taxpayers into the tax bracket. We've also reduced on the tax exemptions, and we expect with the reduction of tax exemptions and also the increased revenue base and the ICT programs, we shall be able to hit our targets.
Meanwhile, Tourism and Wildlife Cabinet Secretary Najib Balala has reduced park entry fees by 50% in a bid to revive the sector from the COVID-19 pandemic.
We want to announce a 50% discount of all park entry fees into Kenya Wildlife Service, marine parks and reserves.
The tourism sector has lost close to 80 billion Kenyan shillings following the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic. Muhammad Ali, TV47, Nairobi.
The Interfaith Council, deliberating on the reopening of worship places, is almost completing its recommendations. The council is expected to hand over their recommendations to President Uhuru Kenyatta before Sunday. Eli Logova reports.
The Interfaith Council, tasked with coming up with protocols and guidelines on phased reopening of religious activities, has been left with barely 3 days to submit their recommendations to President Uhuru Kenyatta for further deliberations. The Council has so far concluded the process of collecting opinions and views from Kenyans.
We have interacted with many people. We have interacted with many religious leaders and continue to receive many suggestions which we wish to incorporate so that the whole entire country and all people we know in our country believe in God can be as best prepared as we can at the time when we'll be having the places of our public worship once more reopening.
The Council of Governors wants worship places to ensure physical distancing if they will be opened. The county bosses have also proposed religious leaders to discourage interactive choirs and singing during service, encourage contactless tithes and offering systems, and ban crusades and pilgrimage visits. They also want most ablution areas to remain closed.
We do appreciate their new forms of worship, it's something that I ask, that these new forms of worship, like the home worship, the online worship and so on, things that are becoming more regular, even after COVID, those, it is my prayer, my personal prayer, they would be institutionalized.
Meanwhile, Wiper Party leader Kalonzo Musyoka has warned Kenyans residing in Nairobi and Mombasa counties against the rush to rural areas if the president lifts the restrictions of movements on Sunday.
Now, I want you to know, fellow Kenyans, that our elderly people live in the villages. So there's a real threat that you are now going to transmit this virus to the aged Kenyans who are in the villages and who are actually very far from some of these hospitals. So we must be prepared.
Eli Logova, TV47, Nairobi.
Now, following the closure of worship places and other religious gatherings, Deputy President William Ruto seems to have changed his Meet the People strategy. In the last 2 months, the self-proclaimed hustler has met more than 100 youth group and religious leaders in his current office in what appears to be a new strategy that has, however, as well been criticized by his challengers, as Joash Onsare tells us now.
The closure of church and other religious gatherings affected political leaders who would use the platforms to propel their political agendas. Deputy President William Ruto being one of the frequent church attendee, mostly for fundraising purposes. But recently, Dr. Ruto seems to have changed his political strategy in compliance with the closure of the gatherings, but still maintaining relevance politically. His office in Karen is the new gathering point, meeting after meeting with youth groups and religious leaders in the last few days.
Hatutaki ukoloni mamboleo. Ati watu wenye mamlaka fulani wanajaribu kushurutisha na kulazimisha kanisa ati mutafanya hii, hamutafanya ile, mutakuwa hapa, hamutakuwa pale. Sisi tunataka tuwaambie, sisi tunamwamini Mungu. Na tunamwamini Mungu wa kweli.
The Hustlers Mansion has been receiving the so-called hustlers in what Ruto says it's an effort to cushion the hustlers from the COVID-19 pandemic.
Kwanza mimi nataka nitoe shukrani zangu nikiwakaribisha hapa katika Hustlers Mansion. Everybody wakes up early, works long hours, sleeps late, because their hustle must put food on their table. And that is what we want to support.
In the last 2 months, the Deputy President has met over 100 groups in his current residence. Today, Ruto met with almost 25 youth group leaders from Embakasi constituencies after meeting with ACK and PCEA leaders from Mount Kenya region. Yesterday, he met with youth groups from Taita Taveta. On 29th last month, he met Boda Boda group leaders after meeting with the youth group who had recently made garden seats. On 25th last month, Ruto met with 30 youth groups from Embakasi Central. On 23rd, he met religious leaders from Kirinyaga and Embu counties, just to mention a few.
Na nilisema ya kwamba nitaungana na viongozi wa Nairobi, na umeona wamesimama hapa wengine, tulikuwa na wengine juzi, tulikuwa na wengine wiki ile ingine iliyopita, tutakuwa na wengine next week, kwa sababu tunataka pia katika kiwango kingine tuweze kufikia wananchi vijana kina mama wa Nairobi.
The DP's visitors have assured him political support during the 2022 polls.
Wewe ndio chama yetu. Wewe ndio chama. Ukisema tuende huku tunaenda huku asubuhi. Ukisema turudi nyuma tunarudi saa hiyo. Ukisema turuke tunaruka.
The Jubilee Deputy Party leader had recently met legislators who had discharged their House committees days after nominated senators faced the Jubilee Disciplinary Committee. Nominated Senator Millicent Omanga, who was in Karen today, assuring her support for the Deputy President.
Ningependa kukuashua His Excellency, sisi kwa ground, hata kule bunge, tutasimama na wewe kidete. Hii vitisho itaendelea, committees nimetolewa ni sawa, borako hawajanitoa uhai, tuko na uhai, hii injili ya 2022 tutaendelea kutangaza.
Some of Ruto's challengers, led by ODM leader Raila Odinga, have been questioning his contributions in church. Joash Onsare, TV47, Nairobi.
Now, 15 students who jetted back into the country from Sudan have tested positive for COVID-19. Health CAS Dr. Rashid Aman and Mombasa County Director of Public Health have both confirmed this, and the positive students are now safe in an isolation center in Mombasa. Mwangi Maina reports.
The students were stranded in Sudan and were evacuated on Saturday. They arrived in the country and headed to Mombasa, where they were tested for COVID-19 despite them having COVID-19 free certificates. 15 of them tested positive and were put on isolation at the Technical University of Mombasa. They are part of a larger group of more than 120 students.
Tulipima ile Sunday morning, waliingia Saturday. Na ni kweli kuna wengine walitoka positive, and as a public health department we had to make sure we isolate the positive ones from those who are negative. So we have moved these cases to the isolation center.
Chief Administrative Secretary in the Ministry of Health, Dr. Rashid Aman, says no one is allowed into the country without a COVID-19 free certificate, and therefore they might have contracted the virus on arrival.
I'm aware that they could not have come in unless they had already a COVID-19 free certificate, and I do know that most of those students who are already carrying COVID-19 certificates from the institution. Actually, it was from the Uganda virus laboratories in Uganda at that time.
Director General for Medical Services, Dr. Patrick Amoth, say the identity of the students has not been revealed for confidentiality.
Of course, there is what we call patient confidentiality. These are cases that we have reported from Mombasa, but we didn't disclose that these people actually came from Sudan, but they are captured in our line list.
The rest of the students are quarantined at a facility in Mombasa since they were in contact with the ones who have tested positive. The country's virus load continues to rise exponentially every day, with the students who have tested positive from a neighboring county in Mombasa being a testament that today you might be tested and you turn negative, but tomorrow you might turn positive, thereby telling you to continue taking precautions against the spread of COVID-19. Mwangi Maina, TV47, Nairobi.
Thank you, Mwangi Maina, for that report. 16 minutes past the hour. Time for us to take a short break. We still have a lot lined up for you. We'll be back after this break. Stay tuned. Welcome back. Thank you for choosing to stay with us. Remember, you're watching TV47. You can be part of this broadcast. Send us a message on 22047. Our guest tonight is Professor Kibwana, as earlier preempted. We'll make sense of what a Kibwana presidency will look like or might look like now that he has declared his political interest in the 2022 polls. But let's get to more stories. KIAMBU town lawmaker says he has not received any apology from a Nairobi-based lab even after his late mother was confirmed negative of COVID-19 despite the lab's first diagnosis. The Member of Parliament is now demanding answers on the accuracy of the COVID-19 testing labs in the country. This even as Kenya inches closer to the 7,000 mark of COVID-19 infections after 168 more people tested positive for the virus in the last 24 hours. Zainab Mohammed reports.
KIAMBU Town Member of Parliament Jude Jomo is demanding an official apology from a renowned lab in Nairobi after it provided what he says was a false positive result to his late mother, leading to a hastened burial following the government-set guidelines on the burial of a COVID-19 patient.
Well, I have not received any apology from anybody apart from yesterday when we were in the meeting, and it was made clear by the chair of the health committee that the hospital owed us an apology, that the CEO actually owned up and agreed to apologize to me on behalf of the family.
The aggrieved MP now says there is need for emphasizing on the accuracy of COVID-19 tests due to the overburdening consequences that follows a false positive result.
So I wanted the National Assembly Committee to investigate so that we ensure that no other Kenyan will ever suffer because of misdiagnosis by a laboratory. We want to make sure that the results that are announced on a daily basis by the Ministry of Health are accurate results, are results that are factual and not anything fabricated.
This even as the ministry says there is a possibility of errors in the testing process due to a number of unavoidable circumstances.
There are very many things that one needs to look at. When you see a test failing, is it because of the way the sample was transported? Is it because of how that sample, when it was in the lab, was processed? Because once the sample comes to the lab, it has to be processed. You could lose that RNA in the processing. Is it because how long has the sample been around? I think we talked about that. The longer you keep a sample, its viability goes down and your chances of being able to pick up that nucleic acid also goes down. Then, of course, there are system errors.
On the current status of COVID-19 in the country,
today we report 268 people who have tested positive over the last 24 hours after testing 2,704 samples. This number brings our caseload of those confirmed positive to 6,941 out of 1,766 and 1,766,059 cumulative samples so far tested.
20 patients have been discharged from various hospitals in the country as 3 more people succumbed to the virus. For TV47, I'm Zainab Mohammed.
Elsewhere, Kakamega Governor appeared before the Senate Public Accounts and Investment Committee for the very first time today. OPARANYA was put to task to explain the disbursement of 269 million shillings under a program dubbed OPARANYA Kenya, which the Auditor General claims it has never benefited anyone in the country. Elizabeth Mutuku reports.
The Senate's Public Accounts and Investment Committee questioned the sustainability of a program launched in 2013 dubbed OPARANYA Care. Under the program, new mothers were supposed to get at least 2,000 shillings per month.
What happened to the
269,000, whether you are able to, 269 million, whether you are able to verify, because here you attempted to respond to it here. And you said 107,735 million has been paid out. There is 161,596,620, which you are saying it's pending verification. Could you kindly tell us how you intend to verify this, and also how you intend to make sure that those mothers have received the money?
During the period under review, you had some money, 22 million, and you had outstanding payments that you had not made. So the question was, if such a beautiful program should be implemented or is being implemented and you have money in the account and you are not paid, I believe that you have addressed, but the concern that is not visible from your response is this one.
The Auditor General's report indicating that not a single mother was enrolled in the program. OPARANYA, however, insists over 13,000 mothers have benefited from the program.
And the sustainability of this program, that's why the County Assembly thought it fit to come up with the legislation that now provides 3%. If you look at now the accounts we have, I think we have provided about 100 million based on that particular legislation.
The county boss claims that the program was to be rolled out in phases, with 23 million rolled out in July and September and 90 million Kenya shillings rolled out in June last year.
Is this program viable, really, if you are paying as late as after 1 year? So the purpose of the program, again, is being defeated, Governor, through the chair. So if you pay a woman after 1 year and you want to convince this committee that that money is supposed to curb malnutrition, that money is supposed to curb newborn mortality, I think this amounts to misuse of public funds.
Further, the ODM deputy party leader was also put into task to explain why his administration transferred over 10 million shillings to the county assembly without the same being captured in the budget. Elizabeth Mutuku, TV47, Nairobi.
Thank you, Elizabeth Mutuku, for that report. Elsewhere, the national rollout of the Youth Empowerment Initiative, KAZI MTAANI, will start on Monday next week, following a successful pilot phase of the program. Meanwhile, President Uhuru Kenyatta has warned against political interference in the forthcoming national rollout of the KAZI MTAANI Youth Empowerment Program. The president said the initiative was mooted to assist Kenyan youth whose livelihoods have been disrupted by the COVID-19 health crisis.
And I will follow very closely, because this is something that is very close to me, it's very dear to me. As I've said, I've seen its impact on the lives of young people, especially here in Nairobi. And that is the same that I expect to see across the country, the impact being felt by those young people. Let us help these people. Like I'm saying, what we have seen by properly utilizing these monies, we have seen even a reduction in crime, because people are positively engaged. This is what we would like to hear in all our sub-counties. That because vijana wale ambao wanatusumbua wako engaged, there's less crime. Because this 10 billion shillings is being used in the best possible manner.
Deputy President William Ruto's allies have continued to complain of harassment within the Jubilee Party. The lawmakers were speaking during a burial of 3 people who were allegedly killed by police officers during a protest in Lesos, Nandi County.
The legislators Kapserets Oscar Sudi, MP Caleb Kositanyi of Soi, Bahatis Kimani Ngunjiri and Nakuru Senator Susan Kihika have blamed the handshake between President Uhuru Kenyatta and ODM leader Raila Odinga for the wrangles in Jubilee Party and playing divisive politics.
Zile shida mingi tumekuwa nazo ni kwa sababu tumekataa to sing to the song that we are being forced to sing to.
Hilo wanajua kabisa rais anasema hata simama tena. Na ni kweli, rais asimame tena. Lakini mnajua ile kitu anataka? Anataka communism muingie, akuwe chairman, wakuwe kama kule South Africa, wakuwe chairman ana nguvu kuliko president na kuliko mtu mwingine yote. Hiyo ndio rais wetu wa Kenya anatafuta saa hii. Asiwadanganye ati hakuna kitu anataka. Anataka bado shiba.
Speaking in Nandi County, the members of parliament accused the Jubilee Party leader of intimidating leaders supporting the Deputy President William Ruto's 2022 presidential bid.
So what? Mmefuta wale juzi, so what? Mmefuta bado, so what? Mmefuta kiinga, so what? Mnataka kufanya nini, so what?
It is so sad that a party with absolute majority in the Senate, absolute majority in Parliament, absolute majority in the county governments, absolute majority in the Council of Governors. Sasa Jubilee tunaenda kuokota sijui KANU wabunge 3, CCM, MCA sijui 2 na mbunge 2, sijui independent, sijui tunaokota ngine ya Kalonzo. Kalonzo mwenyewe alisema he would rather die than come to Jubilee, but he's in Jubilee now.
They were speaking at Lesos in Nandi County during a fundraising for the families of the 3 men who were allegedly shot dead by police last week during protests at Lesos Trading Center. Nandi Governor Stephen Sang and Uasin Gishu Deputy Governor Daniel Chemno challenged the Police Service Commission to assure the families that justice will be served.
We hope that the national government will step in and ensure that they are able to deal with that situation, because this is a product of a rogue police officer who sits within National Police Service Commission. Na mimi nataka kuomba hiyo ifanyike.
Area MP Alfred Keter skipped the event. Calvin Chitwa, TV47.
Elsewhere, Agriculture Cabinet Secretary Peter Munya has suspended with immediate effect the importation of all brown sugar into the country. He also suspended pre-shipment approvals and extensions of all sugar import permits until further notice. The CS said the country may soon be faced with a sugar glut occasioned by increased importation and eventually collapse the sugar industry. Take a look.
Suspended all brown sugar imports into the country with immediate effect until further notice. Suspended pre-shipment approvals and extension of all sugar import permits with immediate effect until further notice. Prohibited the importation of raw cane with immediate effect. Immediate effect, all applications for brown sugar imports shall be subjected to the sugar import-export regulations. This is a great incentive to farmers and investors in this sector. The government has taken deliberate efforts to revive the sugar industry to make Kenya competitive in the sugar value chain.
All right, 32 minutes past the hour. You're watching TV47 News Tonight with me, Abu Bakar Abdullahi. Time for us to take a short break, but when we come back from that break, our guest tonight, remember on the show, is Makueni Governor, Professor Kivutha Kibwana. We'll be talking of what Kivutha's presidency will entail. We'll be back after this break. Stay tuned. Welcome back to TV47 News Tonight with me, Abu Bakar Abdullahi. Thank you for staying with us. Let's get to that interview that I preempted earlier on. Our guest tonight is Professor Kivutha Kibwana, who is Makueni governor, and joins us on the broadcast now. Prof, good evening. Thank you for making time for us tonight.
All viewers.
All right, Prof, you say you have listened to the voice of Wanjiku asking you to run for presidency in the coming election, that you are available, ready and willing to be Wanjiku's president. You are a professor, facts matter, so does empirical evidence matter. What evidence do you attach to these claims?
Thank you for that very important question, because in about 2018, there was a movement where people were asking me to run for the presidency, and they said appende asipende, and there was a lot of activity in the social media about that movement, and even people approached me and said that I should run for the presidency because they thought from some of what we are doing in Makueni, it was possible for that to be transferred to Kenya. But you may also remember that in the 90s, when I was the spokesperson of the National Convention Executive Council, that is the movement which was spearheading the Katiba. Again, specifically in 1997, I was being asked to be a compromise presidential candidate. But during that time I said I was not ready because I wanted to really pursue the constitution making process. So even in the 90s, and therefore more recently now, Kenyans have asked, and I know it's a huge number, because these days social media is a very, very, very important forum, because we have Kenyans the Kenyans who listen to, who operate in the social media are about 26 million.
All right, Prof, you have made your case. Prof, you have answered the question I have asked, but nonetheless, why in your view do you think all these people then who you are making reference to will want you to be the President of the Republic of Kenya?
Part of it is because, of course, they have seen some of what we have done in Makueni, in terms of the promotion of our health sector, because we were the first ones to do universal health care. Some of the industries, young industries, that we are trying to establish, and of course also the public participation that we have done. Many things that have happened in Makueni.
All right, and
because of some of those things,
we will talk of Makueni.
They have been able to say that they think within Kenya, we can also be in leadership.
All right, Prof, we will talk of Makueni, but nonetheless, I want us to talk and base these discussions on issues. Now that you want to be the President of the Republic of Kenya, and the first issue that I want us to talk about is the poverty index, which otherwise is the gap between the rich and the rest. When you hear statistics such as 0.1% of the population having as much as the combination of 99.9%, this is glaring inequity. How do you intend to bridge this gap between the rich and the rest?
I must apologize that my hearing gadget dropped down, and therefore I missed the first part of that question. And please, I beg your indulgence so that you may repeat it.
All right, Prof, I want us to base this discussion on issues. And the first one is on the poverty index in the country, the gap between the rich and the rest. When you hear statistics such as 0.1% of Kenya's population having as much as the 99.9% combined, this paints a picture of inequality and a rising gap between the rich and the rest. How do you intend to bridge this gap as a president?
You are very right, because that gap is due to the fact that although we say our growth rate is about 6% or 5%, the majority of that growth goes to very few people, and you are right in that. And there are many ways in which, first of all, to make the economy be broadened so that it is not just enjoyed by one group of people. If you take the question of, for example, even land, there's a lot of land which is occupied by people and they don't do anything on it. It is just idle. And if through land reform you were to make that land available so that those who can develop it are able to do that. For example, many young people want to do agriculture, and they are not even allowed land by their parents, and there is a lot of land which is idle. So that would be one area of looking at land reform. When it comes to capital is extremely expensive, and even it's not easy for communities to make their small banks so that they can access capital and the interests are low. So one other aspect where one would have to look is the cost of capital so that it's available to the majority of the people.
And by capital, you mean we lend more to the people?
I mean that making capital precisely, making sure that there is financial inclusion. For example, in Makueni, we have a loan we call Tetheka, where we give it to people for 3% administrative cost. And as you know, even within the Islamic tradition, there are loans which are given without interest. So that is what we are saying. There are very many small-scale people, SMEs, who want to do business, but they cannot access loans easily. Again, as you know, many of the poor people are not able to really afford quality education. If there was more access to quality education, so that people are trained properly, they have proper skills, then they would be able to access markets, they would be able to become entrepreneurs. So
all right, Prof,
even in our country...
You talked of, in the answer to the question, you talked of various issues. At this point, let's talk briefly on land. You say if land can be of use, it will be of help to the young people of this country. Equally, at that point, there is a lot of land that is in wrong hands, some historically, while others could have been grabbed. Will you guarantee, if elected as a president, that you will implement the reports on land?
The law clearly says that public land, which is in private hands, should go back to the public. So that is something that is not really contestable. And again, if you have land which you don't use and it is idle, either it is taxed to the extent that you realize that it is better that this land was, either you sold it or the land was made available through a leasing mechanism, so that that land can be used for production. Again, many of our entrepreneurs, there isn't a lot of domestic production. We are depending a lot on imports, and some are cheap things and so on. So again, one would like to promote domestic production and make that easy. Make sure that there's infrastructure for growth, like the roads, the water, the electricity. So they are really, in terms of bringing a manifesto, bring something that to do, which I want to do with the people themselves. There are many things that are easy to do in our country, and we go into a growth trajectory.
All right, Prof, let's move from the question of the economics and the land now and get to political unity of the country. Some will view you as a person who has already failed in uniting his political backyard, in this case, the Kamba base. How do you intend then to unite a country if at all there are glaring disunity for this matter, at least by the political elite from your political backyard?
I think the question of focusing on the 46 ethnic groups, so that there is a logic of initially you must get votes from your area and you take a lot of time getting votes from your area, I think we need a different approach so that you look at Kenya, you say that my politics are about the unity of all Kenyans, the unity of all sectors, not just the unity of the elite.
But Prof, one would suppose that charity begins at home.
We want to make that different. Like young people are saying that that's not what they want to do. They don't want to be taken back to tribal or ethnic cocoons. They want a new Kenya. Even many of them relate to countries abroad because they think that they are young people, they need to succeed like everybody else. Even many of them leave our countries to go abroad. So we want to change the narrative so that, yes, I respect all our ethnic groups. I respect culture. I even write in Kikamba, poetry in Kikamba as well as in English. But we want to actually say that those who are insisting on tribal politics, that is those are ancient people. We want really all those young people, they go to school and they are in schools from all ethnic groups. They interrelate. They grow into being Kenyans, into being Africans, into being internationalists, and not to be captured in the cocoon of a tribe. Nothing really happens there. They are cheated that somebody is going to bring development to them, and there is no development which happens.
All right, Prof, that some would argue again as though it is being too ideal, however liberal it may sound, understanding the political context this country is in. Where you are from, your political goodwill backyard matters, doesn't it? You are a long-serving politician. You know this better than I do.
You see, there are people who have always wanted to drive politics that way. But if you look at successful countries abroad, you find that they actually focus on patriotism, they focus on nationalism, they focus on from the point of view of the country, so that we talk about national unity, continental unity, East African community, and so on. But if you really make impact at the national level, you make impact everywhere, and you'll make impact in whatever cultural community that you go into. Because I am not saying that it's not important to have support there. You should have support there, and you should have support in the 45 units. You should have support among all the young people, the professionals, labor, farmers, women, youth, everybody, so that we begin to rebuild a different Kenya where, you know, we don't discriminate on account of ethnicity, religion, and things like that, so, gender.
Fair point, Prof. Yep. Your Machakos counterpart has also declared an interest in vying for the position that you have also declared an interest in. Two presidential candidates rather, if it is supposed to be in 2022 from the same region. Does this pose any danger?
I don't think so. Alfred has declared he wants to be president. I think Alonso also has declared he wants to be president. Ultimately, it is Kenyans who are going to choose. We shall talk to Kenyans. We shall talk to Wanjiku. And it's a question of, from all other candidates who have declared, who will convince Wanjiku that they can do better for her. So, because we are in a democracy, you cannot tell anybody, don't stand. But I know at the end of the day, the success will be about people who are now tired of the old politics of an ethnicity, negative ethnicity. Politics of being promised things that never happen, corruption and all that. So I have no problem with many people, and in the past, many people have stood and some of them have not really excited Kenyans.
All right, this is a question that I already know its answer to, but nonetheless, let me ask you, which party then will you use as a political vehicle to seek this interest of yours?
My campaign is going to be different because it is actually a people-based campaign. We are going to have, and this is part of what has started already, people with their institutions, whether it is some unions, whether it is universities, professionals, whether it is even people of different political parties. So that people say we are going to pool our parties together. The way there was Ford, the way there was CORD, the way there was NASA, which is about dead. So that it's a movement for New Kenya. So at this point, because there will be many parties which will come together, and initially I used to be in Muungano party before I went into POIPA. Yes. So there are all these parties that we are going to bring together, and we shall now decide how to get the presidential candidate and the deputy and so on, how they will stand.
All right, and as you bring these other parties together, which party then will be the lead flag bearer that will propose you as its presidential candidate?
You see, because now it is 2 years to the elections, and this is a movement that we are building, at this point in time, that is not a decision that I can myself alone make, because all the parties that to come together, all the civil society movements, the citizens movements, and so on, just like the way we put NAC together, because NAC, those days when I was in civil society, we were actually the first people to start bringing the opposition together. And there was NAC, and then there was NCC. Then when Kibaki, President Kibaki, then he wasn't, Ngilu, Wamalwa, and all those people, we brought those together, and civil society actually did endorse President Kibaki. So we have some experience in terms of
bringing parties together.
Bringing parties together, bringing civil society together, organizations together.
Fair point, Prof. Fair point. Many will argue, and this we have seen also in the comments on our social media platforms, that you have an impressive track record in as far as your leadership is concerned. But nonetheless, there are dots to your leadership and you, the person, as well. And this is to the 207, 208 skirmishes. You are in the government. Why did you not advise President Mwai then to extinguish, if not rather, look into the political flames that were tearing this country apart?
President Mwai Kibaki, give him credit. When he decided that there was going to be a coalition government, or the Nusu Mukate government, there were people who were refusing, who were telling him that there is no reason for you to concede, you won, you shouldn't concede whatsoever. And I think our point was reached where he decided that he was going to make that decision despite very senior politicians telling him things to the contrary.
And before even before even the compromised political deal was reached, why did you, among many others who are in the political inner circles of Mwai Kibaki, not intervene? And I ask you this, Prof, at the backdrop of what you said in 2008, I believe January the 2nd, and this is an international media that has quoted you to have said, and I quote, "It is becoming clear that these well-oriented acts of genocide and ethnic cleansing were well planned, financed, and rehearsed by the Orange Democratic Movement leaders prior to the general election." This looked as though you are pointing fingers to one side rather than solving the problem that was in eyesight by then.
I think in terms of what advice you give, because of course when you give advice, you are not forcing people to take the advice. And even when you know, because I had actually a lot of knowledge of some of what was happening, even when you know things like that, you advise, and as I said, that is why ultimately the president was able to take the action that was necessary to stop that bloodletting. And even later, there were some people who still didn't want him to accept the new constitution, the 2010 constitution. And again, because of advice that the president received, he was able to overrule them and accept that that the constitution-making process should be included. But I still want to make the point that
in such a case, a leading politician at that time, as you are and you still are, Was it not prudent for you to have made a public stand of what was going on then, rather than pointing fingers to an already decided opposition by then?
There are situations where you speak out in the public domain, and there are other situations when you, as an advisor, you advise privately, because advice, if you shout about advice everywhere, then it will no longer be advice, and your role is to advise and not to insist that what you say must be done.
All right, Prof, let's talk of the latest appearing that you made before the Senate Oversight Committee on Wednesday, which was yesterday. The Auditor General's report found out loopholes in stalled projects worth 146 million shillings, which begs the question, and I believe this was a question that you were asked as well in the Senate yesterday. It seems as though one would argue that feasibility tests for these stalled projects in Makueni County were not done.
I think this is actually the second time when we were appearing for that year, the 2017-18. Initially, Senate came to Kitui, and that time I was traveling abroad, so I was not able to attend. And actually, there was a social media document which was not signed by anybody, which was given to one senator, and that senator gave it to another senator. One senator from our region gave it to another senator who introduced it, and it was not signed. It was not a petition properly introduced, and it had things that were completely not correct. Then there was a ruling by Senate that the EACC, the DCI should be given that document. And later the Auditor General's people were told to come to Makueni and to be able to examine where those projects were. And unfortunately, and they said this in the meeting, they didn't have money from October to now to come and look at those projects. So if they had done so, they would have found that, you know, those projects had been completed. Most of them had been completed, but because we can't force them to come, so we are waiting for them to do so. And actually, we gave a letter to Senate. That was the first thing that we did, saying that this is what we have done regarding what you ask us. And actually,
then Prof, let me interject you at that point. Is the committee, the Senate committee, then wrong to say that some of the various reasons that were given by your county, Makueni County, includes lack of resources, scarcity of land, and change of projects for stalled projects?
But if one looks carefully, because we have a service delivery unit, we have an M&E unit, and we promised that within 2 weeks we would bring all that information, even if the Auditor General people don't come to Makueni, we will bring that information again. If one looks at what we have done, and because our projects are usually approved by a project management committee, the citizens themselves, and they would be the first ones to tell you whether something is finished or not. So I think, and Senator Ayako said, if they came to Makueni, would they find that those projects have been done, the majority of them, except where there have been problems of there is no land, somebody promised land, then they withdrew, some land is public land, and stuff like that. If there is a borehole where there was only money to dig it, and in another year there would be money to distribute the water. Our work is of a high quality, and that is why the Auditor General himself in 2017-18 gave us a verdict of unqualified. That is a clean report. But I think there are people who think that counties should not get those reports.
All right, Prof, I understand we are out of time. Nonetheless, one last question. You say you want to be, or you are already, the voice of Wanjiku, and now that Wanjiku is watching, Wanjiku in reference to the people, your parting shots probably to the people who are watching you tonight.
I am doing what's already hear that.
You said you are the voice of Wanjiku in reference to the people. I'm giving you 30 seconds to talk to the people who are watching this show tonight as we finalize.
Yes, thank you very much for this invitation, and I really want to say that we are going to the ballot together in 2 years' time, and I'm going to make sure that we discuss the things that you want for a president to do. We will crowdsource the ideas, the vision, so that it's different. It's not like people just imposing ideas on you, manifestos which they never implement. So we are going to have really a good time developing what we want to do for our country together and doing it together with a lot of integrity.
All right, Professor Kivutha Kibwana, Makueni Governor, thank you for making time for us tonight on TV47 News Tonight.
Na asante sana, nashukuru. Thank you very much.
All right, that is Makueni Governor, Professor Kivutha Kibwana, who was talking to us. Of course, we talked of matters, his presidency that he already declared, showing interest in wanting to vie come 2022. Of course, this discussion doesn't end here. Your comment as well is welcomed. Keep sending messages on 22047 and use the hashtag TV47 News Tonight. Time for us to take a short break, but I will be back with sports news after this break. Welcome back to TV47 News Tonight. Let's get to the world of sports now. And AFC Leopards legends are hatching a plan to restore the club's lost glory, which they say has been lost over the years. Speaking in a sit-in with ANC leader Musalia Mudavadi, the legends, led by their chair, Josephat Murila, decried the current state of the club, noting that the Kenyan Premier League outfit had lost its cutting edge.
Tuirudishe club mahali ilikuwa. Tunataka club irudi mahali ilikuwa, na tunaona hii ndio mwanzo wa kuanza hiyo safari.
Tunajipanga kuona vile tunaweza inua timu yetu na pia vile tunaweza inuana kama watu wa njia moja.
Sasa uwanja huko, mpira huko kwa uwanja wa Dan Shikanda. Yeye ndio chairman sahi. Yeye akifanya ajue analenga vile Abiola alikuwa akifanya. ainue from there and even to greater heights.
Now, the World Rally Championship, interrupted in March by the coronavirus pandemic, will resume in Estonia in Mutua. James Sumokwo says, it's time we vote for ideologies and not personalities, and leaders coming together on the basics and the basis of their tribes. Give a chance, Prof. Can make it. Sostin says, let Kibwana support Mudavadi. He cannot make a good vote. So, of course, those are your views in as far as the interview we had with Makueni Governor Professor Kivutha Kibwana is concerned. Well, that brings us to the end of tonight's edition of TV47 News Tonight with me, Bakar Abdullahi. On behalf of the everly hard-working team that makes this production possible, bye for now, but enjoy the rest of our programs. But I leave you with the weather outlook and updates for tonight and tomorrow.